Let's get started. Today's webinar objectives we're going to provide you with information on the AIVRS project overall services. We're going to discuss the importance of establishing an effective outreach and referral process. We're going to review the steps required during orientation and intake, and also review the steps required during application and eligibility determination. And I'm sorry, let me go back 1 minute. I'm Russian and I need to introduce myself.
Slow down.
My name is Jamie Emanuel. I am with the American Indian Vocational Rehabilitation Training and Technical Assistance Center, or as we like to call ourselves, AIVRTTAC, with the Institute for Human Development at Northern Arizona University. And I'm familiar with a lot of you. A lot of us have talked. Our co-workers are on with us today. Winona Reed is with us. And Winona, I meant to ask you earlier, if you have the opportunity to kind of monitor the chat, that would help out a lot because I can't see the chat because I'm sharing my screen. And Laura Maudsley is with us with the TVR Institute. And I'm not sure who else with our department is on. I'd also like to thank Nancy Riddick for being with us today and co-presenting. Nancy is an instructor with the TVR Institute and also with University of Texas, Rio Grande. Is that correct, Nancy?
That is correct. Perfect.
Okay, great. Let me go ahead and move these slides forward.
All right, I'm up. Good morning, everyone. Glad to have you here. Glad to see such a great crowd. We're going to first of all start talking about outreach and referral. Now, as we know, the first step is in the VR process is outreach. Outreach is a huge piece of our process, supposedly should be a huge step. It gives you the opportunity to provide information on services that you have in your area, eligibility requirements, and in essence, it promotes awareness of the VR program and the AIVRS program within your community, your own community. Outreach is supposed to be proactive, meaning that you just can't call someone on the phone and tell them about the program. You have to get out there. You have to maybe make your steps. Maybe make more emails than you normally do, or provide services for the community that you're trying to reach, as far as giving them your goals and your projects or your practices of your program, of the program, and also may include some meetings that you may want to have for the community, agencies, providers, medical institutions, or anyone that's interested in the AIVRS program and in your native program. Next slide. Next. Okay. The goals of outreach is, like I said before, to educate your participants or those who are interested. You also want to increase community awareness. You want to connect with potential employers, yourself, and build that rapport with them. So you're going to connect. And you also want to, again, establish partnerships. And I like to say establish not only partnership, but build that rapport with the community. And so that you will have a good working relationship. Next. So let's look at some examples of outreach activities. You may want to create a flyer. You may want to set up a meeting with an employer. In other words, what I call back in my day, I guess in Jamie's day, we call lunch and learn. They're probably using that term still today, but lunch and learn programs are good for employers. Bring their lunch, provide lunch for them, however you want to do it, and provide that information, again, that awareness to what the program consists of. In this outreach, you're going to provide their procedures and policies, the referral process. You're going to distribute information within your community. That's whatever programs or activities that you may be having. Invite them, invite. This is outreach. You're going out and you're doing these activities. You also may want to connect with the universities or colleges in your areas. No one is without earshot of hearing our program. You know, they say this program is the best kept secret. So the outreach is the best kept goal for no more secrets. I'll put it like that, okay? And then with yourself and your agency, your community, you want to participate in those local events. Next slide. So let's make a checklist so we won't be redundant. Well, yeah, we want to be redundant, but let's make a checklist so we can see where we've been, okay? So you're going to contact on your checklist, you're going to have a list of your contacts, maybe a listserv. You're going to also look at potential referral sources. I like to schedule presentations and what time I visited those particular.
Did I mess you up, Nancy? I'm sorry.
No, I think Nancy's freezing a little bit.
Uh-oh. I'll pick up right here where Nancy left off. So you have a checklist for outreach, and this is kind of just a little handy dandy way of keeping track of where you are with your outreach and your referral process. So these are not mandatory, but these are just some ideas that we thought we would share with you that may help you manage your outreach process and your referrals. So by creating a listserv or a list of contacts for potential referral sources, that would be very beneficial for you. Also scheduling like regular presentations or visits to potential referral sources. You know, go to your local mental health agency once a quarter or every 6 months. Do a presentation about your program and any other referral sources that you may receive referrals from. Just go out and do a presentation about what you all do and the services you provide. Also preparing a referral packet or some type of referral form to distribute to potential referral sources. So this is anyone that we refer a potential consumer to you, you would already have a packet or a form and go ahead and give them to them so they'll have them on hand if someone's coming in for rehab or mental health services or the probation office, or they'll already have your referral form on hand. Give it to the individual and they'll send it over to you. Also connecting with local entities or individuals that may have disabilities or that are represented. These are also great referral sources. And then creating a community network team and scheduling maybe a monthly meeting to create or share information about your project and learn more about other community resources. When I was a counselor in San Carlos on the Apache Reservation in Arizona, we met once a month, myself and all other individuals from other community agencies. And we just had a brown bag lunch at the local church. And we would meet for 30 minutes and every month, someone would kind of highlight their program and what they did. And it really helped with referrals. Also, when we're talking about referrals, referral information to VR services, they can be made, a referral can be made by an individual themselves, for themselves. A family member can refer them or a representative from outside the agency, any educational institution or organization. Those are all great referral sources. And once a person states that they have an interest in VR services, that person should provide you with enough sufficient information to determine whether or not they should pursue services with your project. The response from an AIVRS project to a referral should be very prompt and unbiased and according to established guidelines, policies, and procedures. the process from referral to case closure should be tracked and monitored. So, you know, again, it's not mandatory, but it's great that you track your referrals because you kind of move it forward if you're keeping track of who submitted a referral. Also, referral information, any individual that has submitted a referral, they should have a very timely response from you about their referral for VR services. And typically, not mandatory, but you know, kind of best practice is to respond to their referral within 21 days at the very latest. And keeping in mind that there are various or different variations to the referral process. For example, if a potential participant calls your office, you may want to talk with them and complete the referral over phone. You may tell individuals, you know, come by my office and fill out a referral form. Or there's a referral form on our website. Download it, fill it out, and send it to me. So overall, the goal of referral is to help any individual with a disability begin that process of accessing VR services. Also, during the referral stage, these are some of the things that the counselor is responsible for ensuring. We want to make sure that the individual and agency personnel are educated about the AIVRS process and the purpose. You know, I can't tell you the number of times someone came by and said, work, I don't want to go to work. I want a new pair of glasses, you know, or I was looking for hearing aids or help with my car. What do you mean? I don't want to go to work. So the more you educate individuals about your project, the better referrals that you'll receive, or what we would refer to as an appropriate referral. Eligibility requirements, we need to communicate them clearly to any potential participants and personnel from referring agencies. Appointments, make sure they're made with individuals who've been referred for services, typically within 21 days of receiving that referral. And a positive, productive relationship is established with the applicant. An appointment to attend either a group or individual orientation meeting is made once you have made contact with that referral. So for myself as a counselor, the best practice for me was to, once I received that referral, I would go ahead and send them a letter with an appointment, you know, telling them the date and time and the location of the appointment and a list of any documents that I needed them to bring, usually your eligibility determination documents. So go ahead and send them that letter and say, we received your referral. This is your appointment date and time and where we are, and this is what I need you to bring with you. So some referral activities, resources, and some forms that we've created here at AIVRTTAC. Go ahead and create like a schedule of orientation dates and times or locations for your project. Some folks do orientation differently. I always felt like orientation was a one-on-one meeting with myself and the consumer, but some, you know, agencies, they have a lot of referrals and they may hold a group orientation. But I know among AIVRS communities, we're kind of private about our personal stuff, and we don't really want to be in a group and telling, you know, information about ourselves in front of a group. So it's totally up to you how you hold your orientations. Creating a letter or an email to schedule a meeting for orientation services, that's a good idea. We also have a template that you can use for that. We have a sample referral form. So when you go to the VR process toolkit on our website, there's a blank sample referral form that you can download and make your own. You can put your logo in there, information about your project, contact, and make that form your own if you don't already have one. And we also have some other good information on our website. We have this practice guide for referral. It's located under the VR process toolkit. There's links there. And it's not live yet. I want to say that here at the beginning of this presentation. The website was just revamped and we're getting ready to go live. So as soon as it's live, we'll be sending out an email blast to everyone that you can go there and get these forms. And then also quickly, I want to say that we have provided you with a link to RSA regulations related to the referral process. So you can just click on that link from the website and it'll take you to the rules and regulations in regards to referral. Nancy, are you back on? I can't
Oops,
tell.
I'm sorry, I am back on.
Okay, you want to pick up from here?
I'll pick up from here. And sorry, there is a question in the chat. Are we doing questions now or are we waiting to the end, Jamie?
I can't see the chat.
Let me
Hold on
read
just
it.
a
Let me
second.
read it to you. How many AIVRS projects use a tribal website? I think this is to everyone with a link to disseminate brochures, eligibility, criteria, application, office hours, etc., and project staff contact information. So the question is, how many AIVRS projects use a tribal website?
We can hold that to the end.
All right.
And yes, we will be sending out a PowerPoint so that you'll have all the links. Go
All
ahead,
right.
Nancy.
All right, let's move on.
So creating a referral form, you're going to use this to develop your own referral form for self-referral or referrals from other agencies. You're going to create a list of documents to determine eligibility that a referred individual should bring to their first appointment or to the orientation or to the intake meeting. You're also going to create a release of information form for your applicants to review and sign so that appropriate medical, psychiatric, or educational information can be legally requested by you. And then also developing a method to track those referrals.
Okay, I got it, Jamie.
All right.
All right, next slide, please. So during your orientation and your intake, your participant needs to be aware that they will be learning about the following: the AIVRS project services, policies, and procedures. They also need to know that they have responsibilities as a participant, as well as the VR counselor and the staff have their responsibilities. And so I usually, when I was a VR counselor, I usually stress this to the participant of what my responsibilities were first. Okay, I did myself first, and then I would tell the participant. That way they won't think, oh my gosh, I have all this to do. And you would get I have to do all this. Yes, yes, yes. But so I turn myself around and put myself first and talking about my responsibilities as a counselor, VR counselor, excuse me. Then you're going to make sure that they know their rights and responsibilities, their rights and their remedies also, and their responsibilities as a VR participant, a tribal VR participant, because they do have rights and there's remedies for those rights if they are not taken care of. And you're also going to inform them of the rehabilitation process. That doesn't mean that we do this, that, and the other. That means you're going to inform them of the dates, or excuse me, the time frame that these things should be completed in. Now, don't say, I have 21 days and that's mandated for me to do this and that and the third, because then you're going to be caught in a quandary. And we don't want you to do that. Although we know we have 21 days for this, that, and the other, and we have 60 days for this, that, and the other also. But inform them, this is your time frame. If participants determine that they want to proceed, then this is when they will fill out the application and sign it and make sure that you have a signature from them. Now, each project, AIVRS project, is encouraged to establish your own orientation system. And as Jamie said, there's group orientation, there's single with personal orientation. I go with the personal as well. But each project is to design their own how they want to do this, whether you want to meet sessions on a weekly, monthly, or as a needed basis. And right now on our time frame that we have, it's probably needed on a as needed basis, because I'm not sure what our clientele is or our participant is, but I'm sure we're getting blasted with participants. So maybe you're on a weekly thing. So do your project the way you need to do it as far as the time frame, as far as your orientation and intake. Intakes are personal. I never did intakes in a group. I never did orientation as a group either, but intakes are personal, so is orientation on my viewpoint. Next slide, please. Next slide, okay. Participants, okay, as far as informed choice, participants must be provided with opportunities to actively participate. We can't make our participants do a thing, okay? We give them the information and what they're to be involved in and what they should be involved in, excuse me. And we If they're not, as you know, they have that on their informed choice. Evaluations and assessments, you know, we have to have those. Development of their vocational goals and responsibilities. If they don't know what their vocational goal is, then there's things that can help us, or information that can help us to help them to decide of their vocational goal. Employment decisions such as the services needed to complete their plans and the providers and methods used to procure each services, okay? Participants who require or request assistance in exercising their informed choice must be offered support services. And I read this verbatim because we need to make sure that we're giving them their informed choice and that we give them the services or the help that they need to process this. And most times, someone is going to involve their an advocate, an authorized representative, or even their person or all, and or their family member, so they can have an understanding throughout the VR process of what's going on. The intake information, this is what the counselor does. They take the initial intake interview with each applicant. The VR counselor at this time is observing the applicant and records any observations that she or he may have. And then they can gather the information again with the participants signing their consent to have their medical, psychological, history, education, and all this, so that you can have this in your presence and in their record and inform them, this is where this is going. Okay, next slide, please. This is where this information is going, excuse me.
I just want to say real quickly, Nancy, talking about observation during the intake meeting, this is a really good opportunity for you to document and make a case note right from the very beginning. And I like to, for every meeting, I always like to keep good case notes.
Yes.
Because you're going to use these case notes, especially during the intake, for your eligibility determination.
Yeah.
So if you're working with an individual with a mental health diagnosis or any other type of physical or mental diagnosis, you know, the observations that you make in the intake meeting and that you keep in your case notes will be a lot of information that you'll be using when you're determining your eligibility. So I can't stress enough, case notes, case notes, case notes, document, document, document.
Exactly, Jamie, thank you. That's my word, document. Everybody knows me, knows I love documentation. But anyway, I'll go on. Let's look at the goals of orientation. Is to increase the participants' understanding of the services that we provide, AIVRS Projects provides. Consider the following topics for discussion. Of course, you're going to talk about their informed choice, always. That's number one. That's with me anyway. Even with students, you have an informed choice. You do what you need to do and help yourself. But you're going to stress that also. How a person enters the AIVRS system, you're going to stress that. These are topics you can discuss because you may have a person sitting in front of you who is there on a referral that has no idea why they're there. I've had that before. So you're going to go through that process with them. The services that we provide, AIVRS Project provides. How the applicant or the participant is, how their information is kept confidential. You're going to inform them of their rights and responsibilities. Again, we can't stress that enough either, their rights and responsibilities. You're going to also hand out and discuss, not just give them, hand that to them, but you're going to express and explain the CAP program, the Client Assistance Program services, right? You just don't hand them that brochure. And then you're going to build, again, that relationship between not only the AIVRS program, but the state program. And you're going to explain this program to them if you are aware of what the state VR program is, and then you have that rapport with the state. Now, if you have someone in your office that needs to, that you need to hand your participant over to that can explain the state VR services, not that different from ours, but the relationship between the AIVRS program and state VR, because sometimes there's a great relationship. Jamie, you want to say something?
And usually, I just want to add, if you cannot provide certain services, sometimes you can collaborate with your state VR office, and there may be services that they can provide that we can't, and vice versa.
Exactly.
So that's always a good reason to have that relationship with your state VR agency, and any resources that they have, you want to relay that on to your participant.
Exactly. And if you do not, I'll take it back again. If you do not have a relationship already built up within your AIVRS program with the state program, then it's time now to go ahead and get that started. Because as Jamie said, it's a great thing to have because we can provide on both ends. Okay, we'll talk about that later, more about that later. Let's look at some activities that we have and some resources and forms. You're developing an applicant orientation PowerPoint presentation. Sometimes people do this, sometimes they don't. It depends on if you're going to have a group setting. With the orientation PowerPoint presentation, it's usually held within a group setting. If the refer, and it's not wrong to have it within a one-on-one. That depends on you, on what you can provide. If the referral is not appropriate, for instance, no tribal affiliation or no disability, the case needs to be what? Closed, okay? The case needs to be closed. Or if there's no tribal, say no tribal affiliation, but there is a disability, they refer them to the state. You have, see, that's that state we're building up on, okay? That rapport doing with the state and with AIVRS. So you just refer them over to the state program. You still have to close the program on this end, I believe, but you don't have to continue with it, but you just refer them to the state program. AIVRS project brochures, there's samples in the toolkit. Orientation, there are samples there as well. Intake process, there are samples there as well. And then we also have the smoke signals practice guides, and it's under the AIVRTTAC.org under publications. And that's, I believe we're gonna look at that later on in the presentation. I'm not really sure, but we'll if we have time, we can click on it. If not, you guys can click on it. And then the next step in the process is the application and eligibility. Next. So the application and information is that in the application step of the VR process, the counselor is the big picture here. Well, the client, the participant is, but the counselor. She or he's going to gather all the information that needs to be used to determine the applicant's eligibility or ineligibility for services, for VR services. This will include that the applicant meets the 6 eligibility criteria for services, and we'll discuss those in a minute. Additional relevant information may include work experience, academic history, social involvement, medical history, and legal history. Now, I, as a person, got all the information I need to have. Again, that documentation is vital. You won't have to go back to that participant to ask for that information if you get it up front and you already have, we'll talk about that in a second too, already have that information available. Following the submission of an application, the VR counselor has 60 days to determine eligibility. In these 60 days, all this information is being gathered. You're going to have this, you're going to have what you need to determine the eligibility or ineligibility for that participant. Next slide. If additional documentation is required, then you get it. And if you have to, well, I'm not going to talk about that right now. We're going to do assessments. So we're going to do assessments if additional information is needed. So we're going to do a diagnostic assessment. And it serves several different purposes. It determines that the applicant has a physical or mental impairment that constitutes a substantial impediment. We're also going to determine whether anticipated services will have a discernible impact to obtain, maintain, and retain employment. And it also is going to determine and evaluate the barriers for this person needing our assistance in obtaining, maintaining, or retaining employment. And so we're going to try to alleviate those barriers that they may have. Next slide. So these are some of the evaluation options that you can use for determining, for determining the severity of the disability. You're going to have, number one, I don't know about most of you, but I always did a psychological evaluation on just about every one of my participants, depending on how old that assessment was, or psychological evaluation was completed, okay? So assistive technology assessments, you may have a participant that needed that assessment for assistive technology. Also reasonable accommodations and evaluation. Now, how you get these reasonable accommodations, again, is gathering information, you're doing your observation with your participant, and you're giving that verbal talk back and forth. You're having that dual conversation with them, okay? And then you're gonna, of course, observe them. And of course, you're gonna do some evaluations as well. And then you're gonna assess the worksite environment for those with more severe disabilities. Next slide. Let's look at the goal of the application. This goal is to have the participant begin that process. You're going to verify that the application is complete, that they have signed it, submitted it by the participant and the VR counselor. The participant and the VR counselor must sign the application. You're going to collect all your necessary information, your documents and your assessment information to determine eligibility. You're going to confirm that the participant has indicated that they are willing to complete the assessment process. Now, how is this confirmation going to happen? You're going to ask them, they're going to sign. You're going to make sure you have their records. You're going to make sure that you inform them that this is what needs to be completed in order to determine their eligibility. So once their case is open, it is immediately moved into the application status to pre-employment, to prepare them for the eligibility determination. I'm getting ahead of myself. And then you're going to copy all determining documentations and place into a newly established file. And you are to, I always make sure that my participants knew that this file it was for their looking at viewing also, not just me. They could view it also. So then you're not going, now they know some things you just can't have them viewing because you have it online. So you're going to be careful of as to what you are allowing them to look at. Not allowing them, but because it's theirs. But you're going to make sure that you have the documentation necessary for them to view this. Next slide, please. I think I hopefully said that correct and not jumbled everybody up. So if you need an application activities, there's an extension process some of us may need. So we're going to talk about those activities, resources, and those forms. If an extension is needed for assessments, collection of your medical documentation, this sometimes held up a lot of our paperwork, medical documentation. The participant may have to step in to get those documents from their doctors because the doctors weren't moving fast enough. Then this is when you're going to may have to extend the time frame, okay, the 6-day time frame. So you put that amendment in there. Talk about that later on too, probably. Application forms are signed and submitted and dated by your applicant, and that they are presumed eligible or presumed eligible. That form is in there. Or if an extension of eligibility form is needed because of all this that we talked about earlier, then you put that in there and extend that eligibility for your participant. Yes, the VR counselor needs to sign that application as well. I always sign my applications for and it should be a line there for the VR counselor to sign it because she's acknowledging that this information was completed with the participant. I'm not sure about the VR staff. I never let my VR staff do my signing for me. But it depends on your agency, or excuse me, your office. If your office says it's okay, then you go with what your office say. But in essence, the VR counselor is supposed to sign that application. Jamie, do you know anything different?
I know that some projects do allow that, for whatever reason, maybe the counselor is too busy to be signing paperwork. I'm not sure what circumstances, but some offices do allow the VR technician or the admin person that is collecting materials and documents to sign the application. But for myself, I always sign my applications along with the participant. Because that is an agreement between you and your participant. When you sign it and they sign it, you're agreeing to what responsibilities you have, and they're agreeing to what responsibilities they have. So it's really, kind of a contract between you and the participant. And I feel like it's best practice for the counselor to sign the application. And I want to go back, Liz had asked a question in the chat and said, so there's actually 2 initial intakes, one with the counselor. And Liz, do you want to reiterate a little bit on that question? What did you mean about 2 intakes? Liz, are you there?
Yeah, I think she's maybe a little fuzzy on the orientation. That's not actually an intake. You could turn into an intake if you wanted to, but that's not the practice. The orientation is to give the information for that new potential participant. And then if they then decide to go on through with the program, with the project, then they would then have their intake, and you can set it up after the meeting or after another day or whenever. That's the intake. And you're gonna get all the information that you need. Mm-hmm.
That's correct, Nancy. If you're gonna just tell them more about your, if they don't know anything about VR and they just showed up to get some free things, you may want to educate them more about it and have an orientation with them.
Yeah.
You can go right on into the intake from the orientation and go ahead, and if they've brought the medical documents with them or they've brought all the materials that you need or all of the documentation that you need, then you could just go right into your intake appointment at the same time. But usually you have to let them know, you need, I need to see your tribal enrollment. I need to see your identification. I need to have copies of your medical. I need to have you sign release forms, and so that usually goes into the intake meeting.
Right.
But I want to go back to Earl had a question about, she said, how do you handle, like, if a client submits an incomplete application? Does the 60 days start from when they sign it or when it's completed? The 60 days start once you and the participant have both signed the application. Once they sign it and submit it, I feel like that's a completed application, and your time doesn't start until then. And then, let's see, Joy said, would the orientation be considered an informational session, or does it need to be an orientation with PowerPoint and all? That's totally up to you, Joyce.
That's totally up to you, yeah.
Let's see, Bettina says, we have forms other than application that pertain to rights, responsibilities that participants and counselors both sign. Our application is just specific information pertaining to the consumers, their name, address, medication. Okay, thank you, Joyce or Bettina. That's great information, and you're exactly right. That's what you should have in your forms.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Great questions. All right, John, next slide, please. All right, so let's look at our checklist for the application. And everybody probably like, why do we have so many? Why are we doing these checklists? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Because a checklist is great, to me anyway. As you know, I am documented crazy. So I'm gonna make a list for these things that I have to have or that I had. So I'm gonna have a checklist for the release form, and I've received it. I'm gonna check it off. I'm gonna date it when I received it. I'm gonna collect really required medical documentation. I'm gonna have my documentation listed that I need for medical, and then I'm gonna sign it off, check it, and date it. That's just me, but this is what we're suggesting, maybe good practice for everyone. Obtain copies of your identification of tribal membership, driver's license, have these things listed: tribal membership, check, date; driver's license, check, date; social security, check, date; whatever you need, have a list. Complete the CAP documentation, complete / explain the client application program, okay? Documentation. This means that you also gave it to them, you explained it to them, there was questions back and forth or not, and then you go on. And then your completion of your application case notes, check. Although you're gonna have this on your case notes on the computer, maybe on hard copy, but you still need to check and date it, okay? And then your next thing we're gonna talk about is the eligibility.
You want me to pick up
I
here?
missed that
Nancy?
question. No, I can go on, but there's a question that came up or a statement that came up. I was looking at a question that came up, but I'll go on and we can answer it in a second. Eligibility forms.
Jamie Hall says, I signed the IP after participants sign. I don't sign the application. Looks like I will need to add a signature line for me. Yeah, that's probably what. And we have an example of a blank application, Jamie, on the VR process toolkit. Sorry, Nancy.
That's okay. That's okay. That was good that she brought that out. All right, so let's go through the eligibility criteria. The applicant must have proof of membership in a federally or state recognized tribe. The applicant must live in or near the reservation. The applicant must have a physical or mental impairment. Now, let me stop right here, because I know some of this is redundant to a lot of you, but you know what? Why not? Why not get that refresher, okay? And so if we're missing something, it's here, okay? So please bear with us. The applicant's physical or mental impairment must constitute or result in a substantial impediment to employment. That one right there, it gets people every time. So make sure that we understand what that means, okay? The applicant must require VR services to prepare for and engage in high quality employment that will increase opportunities for economic self-sufficiency. And the applicant must be able to benefit in terms of employment outcome from the provision of services, VR services. Okay, let's go on. So the documents that are needed to review when determining eligibility. Number one, well, there's no specific order, but yeah, number one, tribal certification, a tribal membership card or certificate of degree of Indian blood, CDIB card, or if the tribe used the CDIB card, or any other proof that a tribal nation may use to identify tribal membership. You're also going to need the proof of residency. Now that may mean a driver's license, recent mail, whatever type of mail. Now, be careful of the type of mail that you're receiving. And I say this because people can use anyone's address, so please make sure. You also, with this, you're also going to want to have a map of the home address. Now, someone asked me this before when I was doing a training. Well, why I got to have a map of their street address? Suppose you have to go there to see them. Or suppose you have to send an ambulance there or something. I don't know. I'm just spewing out things. You make sure that you have a map of their home address, because someone will need to probably get there. Or you may have to have this for proof that they actually live there. So if they don't know their map or how they get to their house, send them back to gather that information. And all school records, you know, if they had an IEP while in high school or while in middle school, high school, or college, university, they would have an IEP. They have to have that, not university, but middle and high school. Medical records, most current within 2 to 3 years, okay? Again, that's that psychological evaluation. That's medical records that they've been to a doctor, they got an impediment to employment. And if it's within two years, I always said 2, but if they say it's here 2 to 3 years, then I would get current medical information. Documentation from external vocational and psychological evaluations, have said that, but stressing it again. Any other assessment that has been completed by a certified professional, it would behoove you to get this information. You're also, if they're receiving SSDI or SSI funds, then you would need to get that also. Title II, Title 9, or Social Security Act, or any other title that they have, that's not 9, but any other title that they have, excuse me, information they have on titles, then you get that for them. Yeah, that's what mines were. Assessments every year, yeah. Thank you, White Otter, that's correct. Some people require documentation a year. Next, please.
I just
Thank you.
want to,
Go ahead.
Heather had asked a question. She said, could you explain the map to the home address?
Oh,
Would that be proof of address? Yes, because we know a lot of our participants and ourselves, if we actually live on the reservation, we may not have a street address. Some, you know, and if you don't have a house number or a street address, you do need proof of their home address. And the best way is to physically draw out a map,
yeah.
go down, you know, Indian route, whatever, to the stop sign, take a right. The house is the second one on the left, or, you know, so that's very important to have that documentation, because you do have to have proof of their residency.
True, true. Thank you, Jamie. And thanks for the question. So, presumption of eligibility. If a VR staff have verified that an applicant is receiving these, excuse me, SSI or SSDI, the applicant is presumed eligible for services. Okay, that's a high stressor on presumed eligible for stressors. They still have to go through everything that's paperwork, the eligibility for services. They have to still turn in their medical files, medical information records and all that. They still have to go through the assessments that you deem necessary for them to have, okay? It is presumed that an applicant with a physical or mental impairment that constitutes a substantial impediment to employment will benefit from AIVRS services. AIVRS services, excuse me. However, there's an however here. The counselor may still find clear and convincing evidence that an applicant, we're going to get questions, is incapable of benefiting from VR services in terms of employment outcome due to the severity of the applicant's disability. And that's that however. And again, the documentation that the VR counselor gathers will help in this clear and convincing evidence that's needed, okay? So again, we have to do our legwork and we have to do our documentation if we're gonna, my words, I've just lost my words. But if we find that the applicant is incapable of benefiting from the VR services, some AIVRS services. Okay?
Yeah, and it's so important if you do have an applicant that does not, for whatever reason, is not capable of benefiting from services, you best believe you have that documented and documented well.
Yes.
Because this is one area that you want to be extremely careful if you determine an individual ineligible for services. And I'll go ahead and pick up with the next slide, Nancy.
Okay, let me piggyback on that right quick, because I do know that a lot of the CAP services were awarded because people did not have their documentation, the counselors or entities didn't have their documentation. And so we want to make sure that you have that documentation, please.
And so we're going to go on and talk more about that ineligibility determination. So in all instances where the VR counselor determines that an applicant does not meet the requirements for eligibility, for whatever reason, they're not a tribal member, they don't live on or near the reservation, they do not have a disability, any of these reasons, the record of services must include a determination of ineligibility, and it must be dated and signed by the VR counselor, documenting the reason for the ineligibility determination. So here again, when we say case note, case note, case note, document, 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 you have got to document these reasons for ineligibility. An ineligibility decision made because of the severity of a disability must be based on clear and convincing evidence and a trial work experience prior to closure. And this gives them the opportunity to convince you otherwise. Ineligibility decisions made because the applicant did not follow through with disability assessment processes, that must also be documented. And you know, a few slides back, Nancy said, one of the requirements is that they are willing to participate in an assessment. And if they do not participate in that assessment for whatever reason, then that must be documented. And that, you know, if you said that they couldn't benefit from services because I couldn't get any documentation about their disability, then this would be one of the reasons for an ineligibility determination. And also, just to reiterate what Nancy said, CAP services are to be provided to the applicant and encouraged if the applicant disagrees with an ineligibility decision. Because, you know, they, for their rights and remedies, they must be provided these CAP services, especially in the ineligibility determination. And we're going to talk a little bit about trial work experience. Trial work experience should be provided when, because of the severity of the applicant's disability, the VR counselor finds insufficient assessment data to determine whether the applicant can benefit from VR services in terms of a competitive integrated employment outcome. And in such cases, prior to any determination of eligibility or ineligibility, the VR counselor may conduct an exploration of the applicant's abilities, capabilities, and capacity to perform in a realistic work situation to obtain clear and convincing evidence to make an appropriate decision regarding eligibility. So a trial work plan is a written plan to assess an applicant's ability to perform in work situations using a trial work experience or extended evaluation. So I said all of that to say, basically, if you have an applicant who comes in and says, you know, I want to be an astronaut. Okay. You may assess in your intake that this individual probably is not capable of being an astronaut, but that's not your opinion. They may fully well be capable of being an astronaut, but through your evaluation process or a trial work experience, you would be able to actually document the reasons why, not because you feel like they can't be an astronaut or they don't seem to have the capability of it, but because you actually did a trial work experience and documented the specific reasons why. And because of CAP, it's so important to document these things. And I see now that our chat is blowing up, and I knew it would at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a lot. Let me see here.
Go ahead.
So the first question, if that's what you want. What if an applicant is currently working, but would like assistance in keeping their current job or would like to receive training to get a different job? Then this is when you would, hopefully you have already placed supplemental, I see it's been a while, supplemental, help me out, Jamie. When they're getting extended services and they need to have that extended services.
Post-employment.
Thank you, that post-employment services, then you would put this in their plan. You have to come back and amend their plan. All right, they're needing to keep their, you got to figure out what's going on with them that they need help in receiving, in keeping that job, or why they want a different job. These are questions. This is that rapport you're building up with your participant. This is also keeping abreast of what's going on with your participant.
So
And
now,
then
oh, sorry.
we'll continue on talking about trial work experience. If a trial work plan is developed, the trial work is conducted in a competitive and integrated employment setting over a sufficient period to determine with clear and convincing evidence the ability or inability of the applicant to benefit from VR services in terms of an employment outcome. The trial work experience should also include a rehabilitation technology consultation or assistive technology. And under limited circumstances, if an applicant cannot take advantage of a trial work experience, or if options for trial work experiences have been exhausted before the VR counselor is able to obtain sufficient evidence for an eligibility decision, the counselor will then discuss with the applicant how or why VR services are not appropriate and will move forward with the case closure. And then Lee actually had posted a question in the chat, and Lee, we'll get to that question. He wanted to know what the difference was between trial work and on-the-job training, or OJT. And we can talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about the extension of the eligibility determination. An extension of eligibility decision may be considered if the following circumstances apply. If you need additional time to gather more documentation about the existing disability or any new assessments, you may not have time within that 60-day time frame to determine eligibility and to get all of these assessments done in the time that you have. And especially because we don't have a lot of resources on the res for assessments, you may definitely need an extension. Also, if you're doing a trial work plan, you may need to extend the eligibility to have more time to explore the applicant's abilities or capabilities and capacities to perform in work situations. And also, if you're developing trial work plan, no later than the 59th day of the date of the application should be the completion, unless you submit an extension of eligibility. Also, in the instance that clear evidence exists which indicates circumstances beyond the control of the AIVRS project will prevent the decision of eligibility within the 60-day time frame. For example, we just had a worldwide pandemic and lots of people were unable to go to their offices and conduct business as usual. And participants were unable to actively participate in their plan, so or in their case. So you would have extended the eligibility determination at that time. If approved, the extension of eligibility forms should be signed and dated by the applicant and staff no later than the 59th day, because once day 60 comes, then you've already passed your deadline. So those are just some good things to kind of keep in your mind as far as deadlines and timeframes. We have forms that are associated with eligibility. So these following forms should be signed by both the applicant and the VR counselor. The release of information, you may get releases for Indian Health Services or from behavioral health or from any specialized physician. You know, there's lots of different places that you'll receive information from. For example, the school. You may need a release form for the school. You may need it for different agencies. You may need it for a specific assessment so that you can request those records and get those records in-house. Other forms specific to your particular AIVRS project. For example, I used a determination worksheet when I was trying to determine eligibility. And we have examples of those in the toolkit. Also, any type of health assessments, a psychological evaluation. You know, if you're doing any assessments, you may need to specifically have a release form for your agency or for your project. Also, a consent to share confidential information. If you have a representative for your consumer or for your participant, then you may need to also have a release form giving consent to share that confidential information. And also, if you have any type of functional or physical limitations, you know, this is optional depending on your project's policies and procedures. And the goals of eligibility are to help the VR counselor and the applicant to better understand the impediments to employment. You want to help the applicant and the counselor determine what services will be necessary to overcome any of these roadblocks to employment or these employment obstacles. You're also wanting to determine if there's a reasonable expectation that the applicant will benefit from VR services in terms of an employment outcome, and also to determine if the applicant requires VR services in order to achieve an employment outcome. So these are all, goals of eligibility, because once you determine the eligibility, you're pretty much writing out the IPE information that you're going to need. So these are all reasons that you want to make these determinations. Also, we have available to you some activities, resources, and forms that are associated with the eligibility step of the VR process. We want to make sure that you perform any assessments if needed to determine eligibility. If you need more time, if more time is necessary to collect more medical documents, ask the applicant, are they agreeable to an extension of eligibility? If an assessment or documentation does not support or verify that the reported physical or mental impairment is an impediment to employment, then the case should be closed after you follow the proper closure protocols. So if you've done assessments, you don't have any medical documents to support the disability, there does not seem to be any impediment to employment that you can find or that you know of, or that the the participant has disclosed to you, then you're probably going to have to close that case and move forward. We also on our website have a certificate of eligibility tool. It's on the AIVRTTAC website now. That tool will help you in determining eligibility. So you can go download that or use that in combination of any eligibility forms that you use yourself. And we also have a PDF that goes along with that tool that explains how to use it. And also, again, case note your eligibility determination, or if you've closed the case before eligibility determination, case note that as well. So also, in my mind, I always want a case note at every step of the VR process. I want a case note at the referral step. I want a, case note at the application step. I want a case note at the eligibility step, so that you always are telling the story. If anyone else is to pick up that case file or look into that case, they're going to know because you've told the story through your case notes. And here is a quick eligibility checklist. It's a good idea to check these items off if they apply to your particular case. Review any SSI or SSDI documentation you may have. If they are presumed eligible or you have presumptive eligibility based on their SSI or SSDI benefits, make sure you have copies of that documentation. Also, make sure you review any of your medical, psychological, psychiatric, any educational documentation, any additional assessments to determine the eligibility, any documented disability. Paperwork is going to always include the name of the disability, the date, and the doctor's name. Make sure when you're looking at those medical documents that the disability has been described by the doctor and dated. That is good documentation. Perform an assessment of major life areas affected. For example, you're going to assess this individual's interpersonal skills. Are they capable of holding a conversation or working with other individuals? What are their interpersonal skills like? What kind of documented work skills do they have? Have they ever worked before? Can you document some of these transferable work skills that they have that they could possibly use in their employment goal? And also self-direction is a very good area to look at when you're performing any type of assessments. You want to see if the individual is capable of self-direction and self-determination. Compiling functional limitation lists from any existing data or assessments. This gives you an idea of what the impediments are, what the roadblocks to employment are. because the IPE is what you're going to use to remove these roadblocks. So if you have in your mind already what the functional limitations are, how are we going to remove these limitations? How are we going to put services in place to remove the impediment to employment? So developing that list is very necessary and helpful to you when you're moving on to the next step. Also request an eligibility extension if you feel like further testing or assessments are necessary. And also when you're entering your eligibility or ineligibility determination, make sure you case note that. And I put here IPE development is your next step. The best practice is within 90 days. That will help you to stay on track with your case. And I know that this is not a requirement. When people get to the IPE, a lot of times they take a break and take a breather and say, okay, we're going to slow up and take our time now. But it would behoove you to go ahead and move forward with that IPE development, because you're going to be having that momentum going into it. You already have that information fresh in your mind. You kind of have an idea of what you need to do to put services in place and put them in the IPE as you're developing that along with your participant. So I put down here in parentheses, best practice is go on and complete that IPE within 90 days. But I may get some kickback from that. Okay, whew, we flew through that thing, but we're at the portion now where if you have any questions, we're glad to answer them. I know that was kind of down and dirty and quick, and we flew through it, but we had a lot of information we wanted to share in a short period of time. So now's your turn. I'm turning it over.
I think we already have a few questions in the chat. Let me go ahead and read those. I'm gonna go back up to Joyce. I believe she was after my message. Maybe I'll go before her. Okay. Is there a limit as to how many times trial work experience can be used for a consumer? There's no limit to how many times trial work can be used. I've used trial work on one consumer probably 4 or 5, maybe 5 times. So unless anyone else, and this is different than the state VR for versus tribal VR, I don't think there's a difference, but maybe. Okay, if anyone else can answer that differently than I did, go right ahead. Just put it in the chat. Difference between work trial and, oh, because you already said that. We already said that one. I mean, I've gotten lost on the chats here. Excuse me. Hold on. Maybe that was it.
Yeah, there's so many.
Mine did not. Yeah, I'm just lost. Okay. So you guys go ahead and ask your question. That's probably the best way since we're talking now.
Okay,
No?
Dottie said if an applicant refuses to do an evaluation and has no medical records since they never go to the doctor, we document this information, and can we mail them an ineligible letter? And Paula answered that. She said, yeah, VR is
Yeah, that's definitely.
or
Yeah.
retaining employment. If they refuse to participate in the evaluation or the assessment process, then absolutely close that out and go ahead and send them an ineligible letter.
Exactly. I've done that 1,000 times. Yes, go right ahead. Not 1,000 times, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah, send them that letter. It gets out, and then put it in their file that you closed.
That's
Make sure
right.
you put it in their file.
And Naomi said participants are not willing to travel from their village via small planes due to COVID-19. I'm guessing that's just a statement that you're making, Naomi, that participants will not travel. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to say that in that situation, you're probably going to have to go ahead and just close out the application until you can get to a point where it's possible for them to travel. And I'm assuming that you're meaning that they will not travel on a small plane to get an assessment. I'm assuming that's what you meant by that. And unfortunately, I know the COVID pandemic has caused so much trouble for everyone in regards to provision of services, but we still kind of have to make sure that we're continuing to do business properly. And so it doesn't mean they can't reapply at a later date, you know, maybe once they've had their vaccine or maybe once they're willing to travel. Lee says, can we share the AIVRTTAC VR process flowchart? Lee, the flowchart's on the website, but I can pull it down if you want me to. Naomi also said to make sure you case note any calls or any types of contact. That is absolutely right.
Agree.
Yes. Great point, Naomi. Lee again has another question. How many projects send out letters of eligibility to eligible participants and letters of non-eligibility letters and noted in the case notes? I don't know how many do that, but I'm assuming everyone should be doing that. If you are moving your case along and you've determined them eligible, absolutely. You send them a letter saying they've been determined eligible, or if not eligible, then absolutely, they'll receive a letter that they're not eligible and the case is being closed.
Right.
What about autistic disabilities? Pat Walking Eagle asked about that. Same thing, you'll need assessments and medical documentation or psychological evaluation for that disability determination.
Yeah.
Bettina keeps asking about AIVRS provides pay. For how long is this? Paula, would you like to answer that question?
That one's a slippery slope because we're really not supposed to provide wages. We can do contracts with like employers to pay the wages, and then they like, let's say they pay 100% of the wages on a contract with the consumer to be there learning the job, and then soon after that they back out of paying those wages. But we're not supposed to be providing, you know, wages for clients at work sites.
Okay.
Hey, this is Lyle Cook. Could I share something? Hi, Paula. Hey, one of the things is, you know, employment, trial work experience. We call it, you know, just employment training, because they're not employed. One of the things we ran into is our applicants and consumers are saying, I got a job, I work for this place. They don't. So we changed that to training, employment training, and stressed that. And what Paula had said, RSA frowns upon voc rehab programs paying those stipends or whatever they call them. So we also use a contract with a program to lay out, you know, beginning and a stipend. But they, for us here, and I'm sure others don't, some may have to follow the same procedures and others may not have to jump through those hoops, but the main employer here is the tribe. So it's not that easy to slide somebody into trial work experience or employment training. Our human resource, you know, working with them, they were guidance on how to do that. Even to volunteer, you have to get a letter. We have to get a letter assigned by the chairman that allows that. And that's the only way, and it has to do with insurance purposes. And but the other thing too, this training stipend, you don't want it to be more than what the so if they go into that field, so sometimes these work into employment opportunities for our applicants and consumers. that at the end, they'll say, hey, these guys are pretty good. We want to hire them. Well, I had to be real cautious because the training stipend was higher than the beginning wage for that position. And so the consumers applicants were disappointed when they started out like say $9, but the job started at $8.50. So when they got hired, they lost 50 cents an hour. They were not happy with that. So you really have to do your homework and go over and say, okay, when you actually hire somebody in this position, what is their starting wage? And then we go to 50 cents below that. And so that's just a little share on that. Some of the other things is, I'm really impressed with what I heard today and what was shared, because, some of us older ones, we didn't have this type of resources at our hands, and I'm glad to hear it. One of the things in regards to services, RSA had always shared, travel voc rehab is not a first dollar resource. So that's one thing I encourage you guys to implement or add into your training to stress that. The other thing on the applicants, it's just a little addition to what's being shared, the 60 days. One of the scenarios RSA had provided, and a lot of you are familiar with this, the referral points, we leave applications there. Some of us do, some of us don't. And so applications are signed by applicants and left at that referral point. And then it could be next day, could be a week, could be 2 weeks before they're obtained. So once the program received that application and the VR counselor signed it, that's when the clock started, not when the applicant signed it. So, that's just a few things I wanted to share. So that's it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Lyle. That was helpful. And I think that other individuals would say the same. That was very helpful to hear that information. And these presentations that AIVRTTAC does, this is why it's so important to participate and get on and get involved, because like Lyle just shared with you, that is really good information that only someone that is really involved in waivers would know. And I just want to thank Lyle for your kind words. We're working really hard to try to provide as much information and resources to the AIVRS community. And Lyle, I know you're one of the pioneering individuals in AIVRS. So we thank you so much for your sharing your experience and your knowledge with us. And Paula, you as well. Thank you for being on today. I know you're busy. Both of you guys are directors and have very busy schedules, but you have shared with us today and helped to re-emphasize some of this information.
Jamie,
so I just want, yes.
I seen that question. It says, so trial work experience. Oh no, it says, how long is work trial plan? Job triad is 10 weeks. Basically, when I first got hired under our tribe, I went to our human resource director, and I started asking, so I said, so a non-disabled person is hired for a job, what is the allowable time for them to learn their work duties? And the response I received was 2 weeks. So I just kind of doubled that with a person with a disability to 4 weeks. But then again, if you look at a learning disability, you might want to add on talk to your professional to say, okay, for them to learn a task, how long would it? Because 10 weeks is quite a long time. So generally we do 30 days, but if you put that in work days, that's 6 weeks. That's just kind of a little bit to respond to that 10-week job tryout. That's it.
Thank you, Lyle. Thank you for that information. Also, Earl said earlier, does a previous criminal offense affect an applicant's eligibility requirement? Is there a time frame from when their case is closed before they can apply? Okay, Earl, just my personal experience and other individuals, I'd love for you to chime in. No, if a person has a criminal history, that does not keep them from having the right to apply for VR services.
Right.
And the only way I think that it would keep them from being eligible is if they had I always asked if they had any previous criminal history or any current criminal history, because if they do have current criminal history, they may have trial dates coming up. They may have, they may even be sentenced, you know, during that time period.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you don't want that to be a problem. And if that is the case and they do have current criminal history going on, then it may be best for you to advise them to come back and apply later once all of that's been determined, whether they're going to be sentenced or if there's going to be anything that could keep them from going to their job. So I just want to say that real quick.
Right.
I'm trying to see if there's any other questions that we missed. Yes, you'll be getting an email. You will be getting an email about upcoming trainings. And also you'll be getting a copy of this PowerPoint in a PDF format with the follow-up email. So Nancy, anything else?
No, just piggyback on what Earl asked. Earl, the terminology I always used was pending trial cases that this consumer had, or participant. I'm sorry, I'm using consumer because that's what I used before in my time. But the participant, the pending charges, and they understand that word. Any pending charges, that means they have to go to court, like Jamie said, they have to go back to trial, whatever. And no, it doesn't hinder them from getting a case with us, a services with the AIVRS.
Yeah. So we're about out of time. I want to real quickly want to tell you about these upcoming webinars that we have coming up. The next part of the VR process will be March the 30th with our very own Wayne Daigle. He'll be presenting on the individualized plan of employment. That'll be very important for you to see all of those steps. Also, April 27th, we're going to be doing provision of services and allowable costs with the TVR Institute and Laura Maudsley. And then on May the 11th, we'll wrap up this VR process series on employment and post-employment services. So got some good information coming out, and I want to thank everyone for being here today. And you will be getting a survey in the follow-up email. I can't tell you how important it is for us to get that feedback from you so that we can do our best job possible presenting this information. And I want to thank Nancy again for being with us today, taking the time to present this information. Thank you so much.
Thank you.